All right, so I think we're ready to get started. And welcome to level 3 of the Stairway Live to go through DAX and Power BI. So today we have gone through 2 classes already. We went through level 1 in one class, getting started and getting set up. Level 2, the video, we talked about count rows and filter and a few things. And so today we are going to look at level 3. So we'll look at distinct, and then I suspect we'll actually get through the blank and maybe is blank functions as well. So I may get through level 3, 4, and 5 in this video, but we'll see how long it takes and go from there. So in 3, we're looking at distinct, which again, it builds on what we did in level 2. So similar to what we did with filter, it gives me a distinct set of values within the target column. So it removes duplicates, which is an interesting thing to think about, right? That you want to know that you are actually getting this level of things. Now, distinct, like in T-SQL, may or may not be what you expect, because there can be some issues there. How do we handle nulls, et cetera, missing values, those kinds of things. So that's what we want to do. So in looking through this, when I did it, the first thing is kind of, again, it's looking at Power Pivot here, but we're going to use Power BI, and it's loading in a bunch of tables from the data warehouse. So in this case, it says select these tables. We're not selecting related tables. So customer, date, product category, subcategory, promotion, that. In the Power BI model that we created in the previous levels, we have those. Let me shrink this one slightly so we can see. So customer, we don't have customer. Well, we do have date. We do have product category, product subcategory, promotion, sales territory. In fact, internet sales is here. We don't have dim customer. So let's load dim customer again. Now, we did this before, so it should be something we're getting familiar with. I'll connect to SQL Server here, and we'll load some data. Now, since the last class, I actually loaded a new machine. Well, not loaded a machine. I started a new machine here. So the name of the machine has actually changed. The old machine is visible on the network. I could connect to it. But in this Power BI desktop file, which I copied from the old machine to this one, I actually had connected to that machine and loaded these files. So they're already listed here. It says unencrypted connection. That's fine. That's what we want to do. I don't have encryption set up on my local lab servers. So in this case, we'll pick the database, and then dim customer is the one that we want. So let's load this. And it actually loaded this file up because the old machine actually was turned off when I first created this, and it says dim customer 2. So apparently I did have dim customer, and I just misread that. So we can see it here. I'm going to just delete that one so I don't confuse myself. But all of the data was in the Power BI model, even though the old machine was turned off. So it wasn't a live connection to this data. That load actually loads and compresses this data into the Power BI file. So I do have a dim customer file here, which is good to see. So let's go and find our file here, or our Stairway. We've loaded all of the data and we can see it. So let's get into the distinct function. So distinct returns a one-column table that contains distinct values. This is a filter function, which is good to know because we looked at filters briefly in the last level of this. And then let's see, distinct is useful in combination with count rows where it gives me a distinct count. So in SQL Server, that's not terribly difficult, but perhaps in Excel and doing data analysis is something you want to think about. There is a filter context here, so that may cause an issue. So one of the things we may want to do, say here, is look at distinct customer keys, maybe for only a region. So let's look at how this works. Now, it acts on a column, returns a one-column table with distinct values. It cannot be used to return values into a worksheet or cell. So I think into our model. So often we're going to pass to another function. So I don't know how that'll affect Power BI, but we'll see. We'll experiment with it. distinct, and a column. So I assume this is a qualified column as it shows here, so we'll have to do that. It says it's intuitive once we grasp the purpose, which hopefully we will grasp the purpose this week. We'll see. We cannot return this to the column. We have to manipulate lists somewhere else. So let's get a feel for this. So we want to do a distinct on the English promotion category. So there's really 3 categories here. And let's see if that's what we see in the Power BI model. So in dim promotion, let's look at dim promotion. In the English promotion category, that does look like what we see. We see just 3 values here. So knowing distinct, if we try to create a column, we'll get an error, which probably makes sense. So if I were to try to create a new column, we'll leave it as column 1 here, and we'll say equals distinct dim promotion English promotion category. We'll close that out. What happens? So we get a table of multiple values. So each one, the thing is, I'm getting this table for each one of these values, which isn't what we want. So we need to do something different. If we use a function intended when enclosed in a wrapper function returns a singular value, then that's what we do. So let's see what we're going to do here. So we're going to use this in combination with count rows and filter. So let's try something here. So we're going to add a column to dim promotion, which is what we tried to do. We got the error. Select the function, and we're going to insert the count rows function. So we can do that easily. Equals count rows, that's fine. We don't need to worry about that here because Power BI is different than Excel. And so it's saying count rows, dim promotion. Okay. So let's change this. Is there a name? Discount promotion. So let's do this. So we'll change the name here, even though we don't have an error. And we're going to change this to the formula that was there, which is count rows of dim promotion. So let's change this to count rows, because count rows takes a table, not a column. So let's see if this works. That's what it should work. And in fact, scrolling across, I do see the count rows. So that's correct. Now we want to do distinct. So what are we going to do? The table has 16 rows. Well, we want to do a distinct for unique members. So there's only 3 categories, which is what we see in our data model. And distinct counts are complex, but this is easier because this will return a single column table. So we're going to wrap it in count rows. So we'll get that single column table back. If I understand this, what we're actually going to do is get the single column table for this type of promotion. So for example, no discount. And then we'll do a count on that single column table, which will return a scalar value. So I assume for no discount, I'm going to get a 1 here. If I wrap this up for customer, I'll get 2 for these rows, and then whatever number, 14 for the reseller. So if I were to pick this and I were to go distinct, and we're going to do dim promotion, sub English promotion category, and then we need another parent to close this out. Let's see if that works, and then I'm going to go back to the article and see. If that works, then I get a 3 here. Maybe I can't count. I get a 3 everywhere. So something is not quite correct, I think. Let's see. So dim promotion category. So we get count rows, distinct, dim promotion, English promotion category, which is what I was trying to do. Now we press enter, we get 3 for everything. Aha, so that's interesting. That is what we expect. So what it's actually doing is there's no context here. It's not taking context of this column. It's actually going through and saying that, well, there are three distinct categories that are available. So for all these, for everything in here, there's only three categories, which I guess makes sense. And maybe I want to use that somewhere in there. So we'll see. So now we create a measure, right? A measure is a value that we might want to use instead of a column, right? A measure can return the result of an aggregate somewhere. So this is saying create a pivot table, and then we'll place some values in there. So last time we did this, we actually did that here. So let's create another table and put it in here. And this way it was sliced. So we'll say create table. In this case, what are we going to put in there? So we have the slicers, which we talked about last time. So we're going to put this value into sun columns pillar above. We're going to create a new measure. So I don't need to do that here when I'm creating this. I can actually, here I can create a new measure. I'm going to do a new measure. And it'll give me the same options here to create this measure. So my measure is going to equal, let's see, copier type, memex discount promotion. So that's the name of our measure, I believe. So let's put that here. So put that, whoops. I did a working on it, which was not at all what we wanted to do. No. Maybe I didn't create it because I was messing it up. So let's do this cut paste thing is somewhat sensitive. So we'll paste that in there, and then we're going to insert count rows distinct of the English promotion category. So we're doing the same formula we did before. So let's stick that in here. And then I need to close this out to close out the count rows. But I want the distinct in there. I didn't get the distinct. So distinct. So that means I need another closure. So that's the distinct. And that's the count rows. And that should be right. So we created this new measure. And we put it in there as value. So let's put this in there. So it says 3. But if I were to create a slicer, let's create a new slicer here. Put this down there, and let's put in English promotion category, this one. So I have one row there. No discount has one row. Reseller has one row. Okay, well, that's interesting. I didn't do something correct here. So distinct places it in there. And oh, so they're actually sticking this other one in here too. So the sum of the distinct, which is what we have. It doesn't say that that's a measure, right? That's a measure. Interesting. Something is not quite what I expect here, but that's okay. That's what we're doing, is working through this, trying to understand things. So they've added up to a total. So I didn't get, for some reason, a show as table. It's in there as a table. I'm going to close my visualizations and filters, and I'm going to expand this one slightly so I can just see better what I've got. dim promotion, max discount promotion. So that's what that is. And I'm not seeing it as an aggregate though. So that's interesting. What is going on there? Why don't I see that as an aggregate? Why don't I see it as a sum? I suspect it's something that I could have done differently here when I added this to the table. So this is, I think, one of those places. We're in the measure tools. I don't want to be in measure tools. So let's turn it off. Oh, that's just page level filters. Nothing in there. And this is in the visualization. It's in there's a value, max distinct count. Let me just remove one of these real quick. So that's the measure. Oh, I think this is what I want, the distinct counter promotions. What if I add that in there? Yes, so that's what that's seeing there. So that's 3 and 48. Aha, so I had the measure twice. My mistake. This is the actual column. So when it says here that we added the sum, where's that at? The sum of discount, and then there's max discount. So I had max twice, but this is distinct count of promotions and max distinct count of promotions. So I've got those in there. We've got that sum of sum thing again. Okay. Yep, so these 3 rows are being added for all 16 rows because there's 3 16 times. And so when I say count, then I get this in there. So that makes sense in some sense what we're doing. So that's distinct. And the summary here, distinct is a way to leverage distinct and count rows to deliver a distinct count. And I think the measure is the way that we're actually doing this. The sum of this makes sense. And in fact, I think we'd want to delete that out of there when we're looking at that. If I said this, it's a distinct count. There's only one of each in some sense here, or it's not counting the rows. Let's if I put that back, where's that at? Let's put that back in here. And I said customer 6, 3, and 39. So I think what we're seeing here is the 3 that say no discount is there's one that says customer, or 2 that say customer. So I'm getting 3 and 3 here from these values. So I'm getting 6 there. So in essence, I think if I was trying to figure out how many rows would appear in that particular item, what I'd really want is this value divided by the max measure with the value in that column. So this would be 2, this would be 1, right? Because I'm dividing by 3, and this would be 13 is what I'd actually get there. So that does make a little bit of sense here. I see that. All right, so let's move on and let's go to the next one because that went fairly quickly. So now we're looking at the blank function. Now blank returns a blank empty value, which is weird, right? Like I don't normally have null and we have to decide, if we use coalesce or as null or something, what we're going to return. But we found that count rows will return a blank if there are actually no rows, but it returns a 0 if there are rows that are somehow filtered out, which is interesting behavior for count rows. So we're going to look at blank. Let's skip this part because again, it's just loading data. I wish this wasn't there. Do we have customer, date, product, subcategory, fact, internet, and fact reseller? I believe we have all of those values. So fact, internet, fact, reseller. So we do have all the tables we need. We are not doing related tables, but we already did that in the previous one, so we should be fine. So let's now look at the blank function. Returns a blank, a fundamental important function. It's a text function. Oh, that's interesting. So far, we've been mostly doing numeric things. So blank is used in different contexts. So it may return a blank where the denominator may be empty or 0. And so return a blank value. It's a utility, return a blank value. So that's, I still don't know where we'd use that, but I guess we'll find out in a moment. So blank. So how do we use this? We want to return a blank depending on the result of a calculation, which can be desired. Okay, so that makes sense. So blank returns a blank once operated on. So maybe we multiply by a constant. We're computing sales tax on empty or null value. So many operations don't generate a blank where one operation is blank. So I assume here the sales amount is missing. We don't, in the multiplication just returns a blank. Not sure why we need that, but here is what we're doing is that if the value is less than 500, we return a blank, otherwise we return something else. So that's a textual value, right? So we're making some, I'd say denormalization, but we're adding some context to what's in a row. And we may want to return a blank rather than an NA or something else. Okay, I guess that's something that we might want to do. So it's creating a bucket. It's a bucket. A bucket makes sense here. So we're doing buckets. So let's practice doing this. So we are going to click on the reseller tab. We're not going to do that because we have these as tables. And it says add a column. And so we're going to add a logical if query. So let's see if actually works. So we're doing, was it factory reseller sales? Yes, factory reseller sales. So we're going to add a column that says if the discount amount. So let's do that. I'm going to go back to the data model because I just find it somewhat easier to work over here. So factory reseller sales, and we're going to say new column. And we're going to say if discount amount. So factory reseller sales discount amount. That's what we have here. Equals 0, we're going to return blank. So that's this equals 0 blank. And close that off. Okay, so that creates a bucket. And then I want to name it something. So Oh, so if it's false, then we're going to return this. So blank comma this value. Over here, comma. Otherwise, we're going to do this. And I think this is not really how we want to format things in Power BI. I wish you would rename these early, but I think it's because Power Pivot works differently than Power BI. So discount percent of sales should be equal to discount amount divided by sales amount, unless the amount is 0, because if the amount is 0, then this is divided by 0. So in that case, we'll return blank. So let's see what happens. Well, we didn't get an error, always a good thing. Let's slide over to the end. So discount percent of sales, and we have error. The syntax for sales is not connect. That's why. Because this is fact reseller sales, discount amount divided by fact reseller sales amount. So it helps to use the correct name of the table in the formulas, just so we're aware. Aha. So discount amount is our 0 here. So we're just going to return a blank there. So that way we're not going to divide by 0 error here. If we scroll down for something that's non-zero, Tell me something is non-zero in this table. Well, that makes sense, right? So I think in many situations, my instinct is to return to zero here. So I would say if this amount is zero, return zero. Otherwise, I return some percentage calculation. But in Power BI, perhaps because of the reporting in DAX, there's a reason we might want to return zero because we don't want to imply that maybe it's out of bounds or something else. We might want to really have a blank there that says it's zero. Of course, I might return no something, no discount or something there. But here we are. So here we have some values, and then we can see there are corresponding values over there on the side. So that makes sense. So Power Pivot X, or I assume that we're trying to create measures that we're going to use in our tables in our visualization display. So we're not going to create a pivot table. We'll just do another table there. So what will we do? So we've got a calculated column, and so we're going to drag that into the row labels. Oh no, we're going to drag sales order number and sales into labels. I'm slightly worried how this is going to work, but let's add a new page. So let's do this class 3. I'm going to leave those over there. All right, so let's add a table. And drill through fields, data fields here. And what are they adding? Order number and order line numbers. Order number and order line number. And I think we want to show, don't summarize here. We just want to show values. Yeah, because I want to see order line 1, 2, 3, 4 there. And then discount amount, sales amount, percent of sales. So let's say discount amount, sales amount, discount percent of sales. Let's put those in there too. And so now what we see is just that data there, which makes sense. We don't have to do the sum versus not sum because we can control that here. So they're all just values. And then so he's saying, let's not do all, let's scroll down, or let's show certain ones. So he's using a selection here. So 069104. So I could use a slicer to do this, right? So I could actually say, it's a crazy way of doing this, but sales order, let's put that there. And so he's saying 0694. That's going to be way down here. I don't have an easy way to search. So this is why I say it's a crazy way of doing this, because what we're actually doing 0694, 1, 2, and 3. I think I might need to do for this thing is I can do a let's not multi-select with control and show select all. That was dumb. That's a super annoying thing to have it reset. So let's just come down further. So I wish when somebody built VentureWorks and they did this, things like discount, they put that stuff. They had more mix of data early on. So having things like thousands of rows before you get to any discount percentage is kind of crazy. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4. And so we see there are some discount amounts in there, right? So once we see that, so now it's saying let's add a new measure. Still not completely sure the difference between a measure and a column, right? Other than a measure appears to be an aggregation of a column. So we're going to do the if function again. If reach discount amount is 0, we're going to do the same thing. Return blank other than that. So this replicates the string we did earlier. So what name are we going to give this? We're going to give this a... I'm learning here that the name comes later. So did we give it a name? Measure name, disc perk sales. All right, so let's call it disc sales equal to if. And now I'm going to grab this formula. Oh, if the sum. So let's just take this whole formula right here and put it in there. So I have to change these names because this is not right. So fact reseller sales discount amount is equal to the sum of reseller sales discount amount divided by the sum of fact reseller sales amount. So rather than doing it for each line item, we're getting the sum of all of their discounts and all of their sales amounts, which feels wrong. Feels like I should get these and then do it, but maybe I am in fact missing something. So we're going to get this new measure. So discount perk sales instead of sales. Yeah. So let's come back over here. Can I come back here? Why can't I close my, there it is. Okay. And so now let's put that in here. So into our table, what do we get? Oh, because this one was a sum. So if I would actually look here and I said, that is a sum. It says I'm getting some wrong values, but if I scroll through, they all look the same to me. Well, these are the same values. So it's easy to see while they check values in row by row, the first calculation is incorrect. So maybe that's where I'm missing it. Well, I don't see a first value calculation. So somewhere I think as things are pulled in, Power Pivot is doing something different than I see in Power BI. Maybe Power BI actually fixes this item. All right, so in any case, let's save this. Maybe this is what's wrong. So if I were to pick just ones, if I pick just this one, well, look at that. That's interesting. So I'm getting different values here from the measure versus all of it. So maybe this is what it means by the total being different values. We've got a correct and incorrect one. I don't think we got a 2.7% set of discount. This one, maybe the fidelity is wrong. Interesting. Let's jump to isBlank and try to cover this one last area because these are related functions and then go from there. So we did isBlank. This is going to return true or false. So we can look at blank and then isBlank. So we'll look at these things. So again, we've got this thing open. We imported the tables. We should be fine. We'll repeat a portion of our discussion. Empty values are treated. So empty values can cause errors, which certainly with divide by zero, empty values can cause issues there. So Power Pivot designates a missing value as blank. So when we add a number to a blank value, the number itself is returned instead of null or another blank. So that's interesting. That's different, right? If I add a number to null, it doesn't work. So blank appears to be a value like null, unique value, but we can add a number to it. And so we can use blank with isBlank to decide. So isBlank returns true or false. So obviously useful in if functions then. Let's see, it's testing against empty values. So isBlank returns true when there's an empty value. True or false, isBlank supports functions. It's hard for me to talk and read quickly, so isBlank return true or false to the blankness of a value. So if the middle name is blank, then we use NMI, no middle name. So we're returning a different value in here, which makes perfect sense there. So rather than keeping the middle name, we might have a different name column here where we're in essence manipulating the data here. So let's practice this. So let's make a calculated column. So product and product line. Let's say there's some product line on the rows. Standard cost. So let's create a new table here. We'll leave this slicer there. Actually, let's call this is blank. It's probably a poor set of things I'm doing here in terms of practices, but in any case. So in terms of product, what did they have? Product line and standard cost. So product line can put over here. Standard cost is a sum. All right, so I see something similar to what we have here. I'm going to shrink my Power BI slightly. So that looks similar, right? That I've got something similar there that we would have. So now the top row is blank. Oh, it is blank. That's too small. We're going to keep this bigger. So our colleague would rather see unassigned there. So we'll do on the product and we'll add a column to product. So I'm going to come back to my model. Product, new column. And we'll call this column. What will we call this column? Sorry, I know I'm going quickly, but I'm scrolling down to the bottom because I want the name of the column first, because he renames it later. So product line name. So let's take that, and then we'll go back over here and we'll say product line name equals, and what is it going to equal? So we're going to say if it's a blank, choose unassigned, otherwise choose the line. So this is just like calculated column that we might stick into a table. We could, that we have a function, we could use a case or something else in T-SQL. So here we go, if is blank, product line, then we'll do unassigned, otherwise product line. So let's see what that gives us. Of course, wide tables becomes problematic, and I think this is probably because I have, let's table dim product. It helps to name your tables correctly. I've always found that if you have the correct table name, you can often get the query to work. Oh, so here we have unassigned all over the place. So now if I were to go back, my guess is what I want to do is get rid of this product line And what did I just call that? Product line name. Let me close some of these. Let's go back. Product. So product line name. Put that in there. And so you can see that if I get rid of product line here and reorder these slightly, then this would make more sense. Unassigned. Okay, that makes perfect sense there. That's why we'd use it together. Now, let's look at a measure again. At some point, I'm going to have to go back and try to better understand measure. So we're going to have to go back. I think it's homework is reread this a little more carefully and what measures are, but we're going to replicate some of the steps of the product table. So I have a calculated measure here. So the calculated column is there. So within the field list, that's where we are now. That's what we have. So now let's create a new measure. Is that what we're going to do? Oh, okay. When Summer does not display data, let's collect internet spend internet sales, and we'll go to sales amount. So do I actually have a measure in, or is it reseller sales? It's just sales amount. I have a value there. So if I add this in here as well, that's a sum. I think I'm going to have to add a measure because I think that'll be different. Measure settings. I think let's see, what are we doing here? So the value of the field list, sum of sales amount, edit measure, and we're going to change the name. So internet sales amount and reseller sales amount, internet sales amount. I think I may have missed a step, but let's just pop back up here and see. I think this might illustrate where Power BI is in fact different than the Power BI. Calculated measure, we pull this to pivot table. Clients. So product line name. Okay, so they've got two different ones here. So let's pull cost out. So they're pulling in internet sales as well. And let's do, where's internet sales? Sales amount. Pull that in here. Let's get rid of cost. And so what I see, well, this looks the same. I think this where may be a place where Power BI is, let's do it the other way here, is in fact a little more friendly because Power BI has these values correct automatically. maybe I can rename this one as factory seller sales. Oh, I could rename it here. So I could say internet. Net sales amount. And I assume I have to click this. There we go. So I can rename this separately. So now it says, let's consider the is blank item. Okay. So in this case, if we look at, is there anything else? So one of the groups wants us to compare internet and reseller sales by promotion in their AdventureWorks cube. So what are we going to do here? We're going to grab customer split promotion. So I'm building a new table. So let's go ahead and do another one here. Is blank 2. We'll add a table. And which fields are we doing? So we're going to say, don't look at customers because I didn't add something there. We're going to go to promotion and get English promotion name. So let's do that. So promotion and English promotion name. We'll drop that in there. So internet sales, we're going to get sales amount. So that's our fact table. So sales amount. And you'll notice that stuff has been grouped automatically here by Power BI. Internet sales, sales amount. Reseller sales, sales amount. So let's grab that. Reseller sales, sales amount. Nothing else, I'm getting good at building tables. So these are the sums. They can change the names, which we could do easily. That's not a big deal. And now, so it's seeing these in Power Pivot. This is a measure because it is a sum, right? It's an aggregation, which makes sense. So promo internet sale, promo reseller sale. So I could certainly rename these to internet sales. Let's take this out. We don't need amount. We'll rename this to have the battle maybe actually typing correctly here. So that looks good. Expand the date field and expand the date, drag calendar year to the column. So it's a filter. So if I do calendar year though, that makes this difference. A calendar year. Is it date? Yes. So if I drag this here, then we get something weird, right? Because that's not really what we want to do. Instead, for Power BI, typically I think we would add a slicer. And we would say calendar years here. And it's giving this to me as something else here. So I'm sure I could configure this in different ways, but I can slice it this way and see what the values are. So in Excel, certainly there's that power pivot table choices of doing drop downs and getting things instead, but we can do it differently. So now, measure. So we need is blank, so create a new measure. Table name, measure. All right, so reseller sales, I think, is where I want to create the measure. So reseller sales. Let's create a new measure here. Translating this Power BI to Power Pivot is always interesting. We're going to call it the ISRS ratio. It's a lovely name. And we're going to do an if is blank in here. So he's going item by item here, but what we're going to say is if internet sales amount is blank, I think because that's our denominator, that's what our denominator is here. Right now it's a numerator. I'm going to return that. So he's getting an error. So what are we doing? So what is this formula here? Let's make this a little bigger. If the internet sales amount is blank, return blank. Otherwise, sales amount divided by reseller sales amount. So it can't return the context. So it's at the cell level and not the row level. So we need a ratio of totals because I don't know why. This worries me because I feel like sums of sums divided is a problem, but maybe not. Let's try this. And of course, we're going to have to rename those tables. So let's do that. So this is going to be factory seller sales amount. It's going to be fact internet sales amount. This is fact internet sales amount. What are the odds that this works? Well, I didn't get an error, and I have a ratio. What if I drop that in here? Oh, well, that's interesting. So for blanks, I get blanks, and for other ones, I actually get the value. And what are the odds that was what I was supposed to do? Oh, it's a percentage, so I'm showing it here, but I'd want to show this as percent. Is that right? No, probably not of grand total is probably what I didn't want. Volume discount. I think I formatted something. No calculation. There's probably some formatting value here. That I'm missing. If I said this, can I just change the style? I'm sure there's some formatting thing here that I can say is listed as a percentage rather than as a decimal, but that's probably beyond my Power BI skills at this point in time, so I'll have to look that up. All right, so that's is blank. So I think in summary, let's look at a couple of things. So the is blank field primarily seems to be a logical field where I want to return a blank instead of a calculation or return some other value. So the other place where that was valuable would be in essentially a calculated column of sorts. Where's that name? Right. If it's blank, put an actual value in there in this if statement. So this is a more of a textual item. Right. So is blank, I may want to return blank, or I may want to return some actual value. I'm not sure that these are completely related, but it's possible that you may decide to use them in some way. So in all these examples, though, Bill is using the isBlank function to return some value instead of a blank. Now, in terms of the blank we tend to use, so he's saying blank there. The blank we're tending to use when we've got we want to not have some value. So in this case, is the formula actually listed here? So this value could in fact be a problem. So we can check to see if this value is a 0 and then just return a blank instead of returning a value. So instead of handling divide by 0. So I'm not sure how much I would use that. My experience has typically been that if something like this is 0, I return 0 rather than a blank. But I think the way reporting works, sometimes that blank values are more interesting in Power BI. And in the last one, we looked at distinct as a combination of count rows to give us a way to look at the values of a certain kind as opposed to just counting everything. So if we do count rows rather with a filter, we're using distinct as the filter here instead of actually saying filter with some other convoluted formula. Because in the term in this this table, what I want to know is actually how many, where's the table? How many different kinds of promotional names I have, categories. So using the distinct there allows me to actually count those up. So with that, we're about an hour in. So I'm going to call this the end of this particular session. Let me pop back. So we covered levels 3, 4, and 5 in this video. In the next video, I think we'll go and look at sum and SumX, and I think it may try to do average and average X, combine these two together. So before you start the next class, you may want to read through these two values where we look at sum and SumX and average and average X. And so just so you know, these are both the same thing, but they have different contexts. One is kind of a table level thing, and one is a row by row type thing. But in any case, we'll see if we can get through those next week. So hopefully you've enjoyed this class, getting through this level. And if you haven't watched classes 1 and 2, you can still go back and watch those. If you've got questions on these, please feel free to post something in the forums at redgate.com. In the hub, we've got a link. I should show this, I assume. The community circle, and you pick the class that you're looking at. And there's a discussion area in here. So discussions are forums where I put a couple of things in there, and then we'll continue on with those as we move forward. So thanks for joining in, and hopefully you've had a great day.